What's up, guys? Hope everyone's having a Merry Christmas. Tate and I are taking the week off for our holiday, spend some time with the family. Thank you for listening, though. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for helping One Shining Podcast reach the heights that it's gone to. Thank you for dropping the bag. It really means a lot to us. Since we're taking the week off, we did not want to leave you guys without anything to listen to because you know you love us so much. So what we did is we made our boss come on the air with us, Tate.
Bill Simmons. He's going to talk college basketball. We made it happen.
So we're going to talk to Bill Simmons here in a second and talk about some of the programs that should be better but aren't, or used to be good but aren't. The premise is kind of loose, but we had some fun with it. And
yeah, it's basically sleeping giants. So programs that should be good, we made up some rules so that not everybody in America would say their school should be good, and we're going to see what happens. It's going to be in two parts. This will be the first part, and then we'll have the second part coming out later in the week. Enjoy it.
He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
All right, we are here in our boss's office, Tate, Bill Simmons. So to kind of lay the groundwork here, Bill comes to us. He says, I want to come on your podcast and talk about Holy Cross. We say,
this is February 2017.
We say, okay, but I'm not sure the people care about Holy Cross. And then he's like, we'll make them care. We'll figure out a concept. And this is what we came up with. Is that how it went down? Is that how you remember it?
It's 50% true. In the year of 50% truths, 2017, it was 50% true. No, I was telling you guys, it really bothers me that Loyola Marymount doesn't have a good basketball team. Because when I was living on the East Coast, I know nothing, and all I know about LA is like what I see on TV and Battle of Network Stars and things like that. I just assume everything's on the ocean.
Yeah.
So you watch 90210, and it's like they're in Beverly Hills, and they're like, let's go to the beach, and 2 minutes later they're there. You don't realize like USC is basically downtown LA, not a nice part, and UCLA is in Westwood, which is like might as well be in Pasadena. But Loyola Marymount's actually on the ocean, in Marina Del Rey, and has a basketball history, and it makes no sense why they aren't good.
Bill's very excited for Loyola Marymount.
I am. I'm excited for a lot of these.
So let's explain the concept, Tate. What is the concept? Go ahead.
The concept is sleeping giants, right? So it's great programs that should be good. They have the location, they have the history, they have the recruiting ground, all these different things. Like, why are they not good? So we had to come up with the rules because there's a lot of teams. Every single program would come to us and say, well, we would be good because of this. So we had to come up with the rules. The three rules that we have. Rule number one, no title in the last 50 years. That's dating back to 1967.
And 50 years is a long time because
that's a very long time.
Even older than me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Number two, no Final Four in the last 30 years, which is good. It knocked off some teams that would have been in the mix, but
these are admittedly arbitrary cutoffs. But
yeah, I don't know how you settled at 30 and not 25 or 35, but that's all right.
30. It's because it's the last time Indiana won a national title.
Yeah. Oh, okay. There you go.
They had to keep Indiana off the list.
But that's a good reason, though. I'm down with that.
Yeah,
be smart, baby.
Number three, no top 10 picks since the NBA lottery started in 1985 with Pat Ewing. That's the number one.
That one
pick.
actually makes sense because 85 was the lottery started and the NCAA tournament went to 64 teams. So 85 kind of makes sense as a cutoff point with these sorts of
And it also
discussions.
knocks out St. John's. So St. John's would have been on this list with that criteria we had, but Chris Mullin was the 7th pick that year. So we knocked out St. John's. So that was a good way to just,
So that's what we're doing. We're talking about the programs that either used to be good, not really, never were good, but like we're just confused. What happened? Why have they never figured it out? Why are they not a dynasty? Yeah.
We should mention St. John's really quickly, though, because Sean Fennessy, I saw him today, New Yorker, Long Island guy, and he thinks St. John's is one of the great missed opportunities because it's like, there should be a good, awesome New York City school that if I'm a 10-year-old in Coney Island or wherever, and I'm like, someday I'm going to play for those guys, and St. John's by default is probably the pick, but it's in Queens, which I think hurts. And they've had some mismanagement. But there's no other New York school that you would say that's like NYU's not going to be the school. So who else? Nobody.
Well, CCNY had the chance until the point shaving.
Some point shaving scandal.
Let's go through it like this. I have this listed to give people a better idea to explain the concept. Miami, TCU, and SMU right now are perfect examples of a success story in this. Like Miami. Maybe 10 years ago, you would have looked at it and said, why is Miami not good? You have a great location. You're playing in the ACC. How is
Jimmy Graham playing?
And then Jim Larinaga comes down there. He's tapped into it. He's starting to figure it out. The same sort of thing is happening at TCU with Jamie Dixon. The same thing happened is sort of happening, not quite That TCU SMU rivalry is going to be awesome, by the way.
We're pretty sure that Larry Brown made this exact list before he took the SMU job, and then he picked SMU and was like, I'm going to Dallas,
Yeah.
I'm taking those kids, and I'm bringing them in.
So
and
that
now
gives you an
SMU's
idea.
back.
We're identifying these programs as a place that Larry Brown can go coach and shoot his ass off and bring him back to
So we
Providence.
hope he's listening.
So
well, I think Louisville's a good example, even though they hadn't been dormant for that long, but they died
they
for
were
a
good,
while. And then
yeah.
when they got Patino, he rejuvenated them. But it was always one of those things like, why isn't Louisville good? What did we do wrong?
Yeah.
And I think that's the concept of this is, what did we do wrong? Why aren't these schools better?
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of categorize them a little bit. We're going to start with the dinosaurs. Is kind of what we decided. These were the teams that were good back in the 50s.
Are we
60s
running
maybe.
through the honorable mentions?
No, these are the real ones.
No honorable
You want to do
mention?
the honorable mentions first?
Yeah, I think
All
we
right,
need
let's
to
do the
build
honorable
up.
mentions. All right.
They're like the appetizers. It's like this is the chicken
All right.
finger fried mozzarella stick portion of the pod.
I was trying to get Holy Cross out of the way.
Oh, man.
I thought those were the appetizers. So honorable mentions. I felt like Nebraska should have been on there. Nebraska is the only power conference team that has not won an NCAA tournament game.
It's a football school.
But this was my point.
Yeah.
This, to me, there are a lot of football schools that have kind of like figured out a way to harness the football money, the football attention, and turn it into something with basketball. Like find a moment with basketball.
I don't get
And
that.
Nebraska's
Just like
never-
Ohio State did in the mid-2000s.
But it's not like there's like a slew of awesome Nebraska
Yeah, that's
basketball
true.
players, and they're also a football school. And
But
would
Ty
you want
Lue
to play
is
at
really
Nebraska?
upset right now.
No, but that's true of like a lot of places that are like. Would you want to play? You could say the same thing about like Lawrence, Kansas. Who wants
We
to
could
go
say the
there?
same thing about Oklahoma.
Yeah, or like, who wants to go to Oklahoma? You could say that.
I just think Nebraska. I think football.
They have,
And they're
by
not
the
even
way,
good at that anymore. So.
Nebraska
Yeah.
has like the greatest facilities. I've never been to them, but everyone raves. That's how you know you're a bad program is when like you watch Nebraska basketball games. They're like, well, they're not very good right now, but you should check out this practice facility
Great.
they just built. It's
Yeah,
really
practice
nice.
facility.
So
I'm with you. All right, that's one.
Penn State was another one, another football school that I felt like when you they kind of like own the state, not necessarily. I guess Pitt's kind of in there, but like that was what my thought with Nebraska is that you own an entire state, and Penn State's in the same thing where you're owning. I mean, I guess Philadelphia schools.
I
you
would
have
say
Pitt,
the
but, like,
5 Philly schools plus you have Pittsburgh.
But Philly,
It's a pretty crowded state. It's a big state though. Pennsylvania is way bigger than you think it is.
yeah.
But
But Penn State's like the brand when you think of Pennsylvania. Like that's the first school that comes to mind, and they've never been able to figure it out with basketball. I was doing research, by the way. This is how bad it is at Penn State. In 2011, that was the last year they went to the NCAA tournament. They towards the end of the year they had a good thing going. They thought they were going to maybe make the tournament. They got kicked out of their own gym for 2 weeks because Bon Jovi wanted to rehearse for his concert.
wow.
He took over their practice gym and their main arena to rehearse for his concert.
If I'm playing basketball at Pennsylvania, I'm not going to Penn State, and I think Bon Jovi should have kicked those kids out.
And I think a
It's a
lot of
sad
that
state of
too is
affairs.
like you want to be the star. So if you go to Penn State, you know that the football team are the stars. Even if they have helmets on, everyone knows everyone on the football team. No one's going to care about you.
Yeah.
It happens at schools
Yeah.
like that.
It happens. Sometimes football can overpower.
Yeah.
We had Ole Miss on here just because it's the same sort of concept. These were like the football schools that were just, why have you not figured out? Ole Miss is kind of close to Memphis. There's a lot of talent out in Memphis.
Ole Miss could take
I don't know.
Memphis's corner. I'm not against that one.
We're
It's
not-
a good honorable mention.
And by the way, we should reiterate, like we're not saying these programs should be like dynasties. Just
They should be
they're
relevant to the
absolutely-
conversation.
These are programs that are absolutely terrible, and why have they never been relevant? And we can't figure out
Yeah,
like
the
how-
blindside dad is like the number one Ole Miss alum that you hear about basketball.
Yeah.
It's like the Tui
that
guy.
guy.
Bill, do
Tui.
you remember Marshall Henderson at Ole Miss from like a few years ago? He was
Yeah.
okay.
Those are the two
psycho.
guys. It's Sean Tui and Marshall Henderson.
Those are the-
Those aren't good guys to represent the brand.
I think the problem is when you can't even figure out football. When you're in football school, it's tough to also then concentrate on figuring out basketball.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
That's the.
It would be cool if they were good though.
Even the schools that are good at both aren't really good at both for
Yeah.
long.
Alabama's a good example.
Like,
Feels like they're successful at both, but they're really not.
Ohio
Yeah.
State's
Basketball's-
good at like every single school you think, like Michigan, even like their basketball team starts to suck or their foot. Like you always have to have one big program and one kind of second tier thing going on.
Who else do we have for honorable?
Duquesne,
Yeah, that was a good one. That
That's a good
was
one.
very close to making the list, but it is.
the only
I've
school.
been to Pittsburgh. You've been to Pittsburgh, right?
I've been to Pittsburgh many
Duquesne
times,
and
yeah.
Pittsburgh. I don't know if there's room for two. It's not that big of a city.
Duquesne is the only school to ever have back-to-back
Number one
picks.
Yep.
And this happened in the 50s, granted, but still.
Who were the two? Let me guess.
Oh,
I can't. Who is it?
I don't know.
Charlie Schurier. I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds right.
You could have said any name. We'd be like, yeah, sure.
White guys. Definitely white guys.
So I famously campaigned for the Duquesne job this past summer. Duquesne has gotten so bad that they basically had like 4 or 5 people accept the job because they threw a ton of money at them. They're like, yeah, that sounds cool. I'll go to Coach Duquesne. I've heard of this program. And then they get there and actually like look at what they've inherited, and they're like, never mind, I'm out. And they couldn't hire anybody. And so I threw my hat in the ring. And
That's
a
a sign that they shouldn't be on the list when it's so bad that you're throwing your hat in the ring.
But that's what's so frustrating is like, how do you have a program that went to a Final Four, had 2 number 1 picks? I don't know. They have like a storied history, but what happened to Duquesne? They haven't
earned the dinosaur status where like there's hope for a future. So that's why they're honorable mention. They could be a dinosaur, but they're not
Atlantic?
really. What?
They're A10.
Yeah, A10.
Atlantic.
That's
like
another problem.
Yeah.
Well, you got
See,
VCU, Richmond. That's
some of the ones we have in the Final 12 are schools that actually could take over and get a bid every year if they played it correctly. Like to me, Gonzaga is the model, and I don't think any of us 30 years ago would have said, who should have been awesome as Gonzaga, but they've just dominated in this one conference for a long time, and now they have this little mini dynasty.
I got a great Gonzaga story coming, by the way.
What was Indiana State? What conference is that?
That's Missouri Valley. That was the Wichita State Conference.
Yeah, so that could have been Indiana.
They were an honorable mention too. We had Bill wanted to talk about Indiana. He thought Larry Bird, being an Indiana native, Indiana State has never been relevant.
It's like a part of Indiana that even Indianans look down on.
Yeah, like the only reason Indiana State is not like a sleeping giant. The only reason they were ever relevant is because Larry Bird didn't get along with Bob Knight, and that's it. And Kent Benson.
Yeah, he quit and went to Indiana State.
He didn't like Kent Benson or Bob Knight, so he's like, I'm going to go to a different school in Indiana, and went to Indiana State, and that's it. So if that never happened,
though, as a child of the 70s, I would have just assumed that the 4 biggest schools for basketball, knowing nothing, were UCLA, Indiana State, DePaul, and I don't even know Michigan would be the 4th one, but DePaul was a giant when I was a kid, and then they just disappeared. Indiana State should have been able to parlay the Bird thing. At the very least, like there should always be like a Butler, late 70s Indiana State type of smaller Indiana school that's just kind of grabbing the kids that aren't quite sexy enough for Indiana.
The me's of the world.
The U's of the world. Exactly.
Could have been you, Titus.
Indiana State was recruiting me. Maybe that's why I'm like bitter about them. Like I could have played there. That's how bad they are.
Do you think we would know each other if you went to Indiana State?
I can't imagine we would. Why?
Because your blog, part of why we had noticed it was because it was like you had famous people on your team.
Yeah, I would have sucked. I wouldn't have had a blog. I would have played.
I think you would have played though.
Yeah,
you would have been. You might have started.
Yeah, I would have played at Indiana State.
You could be in the NBA right now.
I could. Oh my god.
I gotta say, I blame the legend a little bit for Indiana State. I think he could have cared a little bit more. Plus, he's there.
He's still around.
I think he kind of used the program and then just moved on.
That's why, but I don't like that though.
I don't either.
The legend, same thing with the Celtics. Although the different reasons there, you've had a falling out with the owners. But the legend should step in with Indiana State.
Seems like he's sort of selfish.
You got to be a little selfish. Top 5 uniforms though.
Oh yeah,
the baby blues are just unbelievable.
Terre Haute is just. I know many people from Terre Haute. Greg Oden's actually from Terre Haute originally. He moved to Indianapolis to.
So there's the story. If they had kept him home,
they could have kept him home, sent him to Indiana State.
He would have
compare where Butler is versus where Indiana State is. What's
now?
Like more remote?
Oh, Butler's in Indianapolis. Butler's
it's
like
in Indianapolis.
Yeah, it's like legit. Yeah.
So they have no chance.
Butler's, chance. Yeah. Indiana State has no chance.
Yeah, that's too bad.
And then the last ones we had were Loyola Chicago, who won the title in 1963.
Did we investigate where they were? Are they in Chicago or are they like in the outskirts?
Yeah, it's in Chicago.
So we have to decide between them and DePaul, and I think we both know our answer.
We chose DePaul. yeah, we chose DePaul. But Loyola was famous for
integrating.
Yes. So the story behind them is the Texas Western team that got the movie made after them.
Glory Road.
They were the first team.
Not a great movie.
They were the first team to start 5 black guys in the game. But Loyola won the national title in '63, 3 years earlier. And they started 4 black guys, and like that was apparently the actual integration.
Not a good enough move. Not a good enough idea for a movie.
But the story, the honest to God, the rule was like you can only play 3 black guys at a time. And Loyola said, "What if? Hold on, stick with us. What if we played 4?"
And
then
everyone's
like,
heads
"Whoa."
exploded. Yeah.
Let's have a meeting.
Wait, hold on. Calm down.
The movie should have been about the one white guy.
Yeah.
In the starting five. Holding on to an older era.
He's like, should have gone to Duquesne.
Yeah, it's like, fuck.
They never get the love though. Everyone talks about the Texas Western team.
Well, I
like,
think that
these were
movie really ruined the story for UTEP.
Yeah.
Well, now it's known as UTEP.
Yeah.
That movie was
That's
bad.
a whole.
Loyola was the one that really.
That's a whole
broke
wake
the
on the
barrier.
ringer of sports movies that ruined the idea that should have been a good sports movie.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
remember the
Glory
Titans
Road's
made
up
it
there.
better because the movie was so good. They made that story better. Like, Herman Boone was actually a bad
And they
guy.
made up a lot of shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is like the Disney-fied version of that story.
Exactly.
That's it. That's our honorable mentions.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we had
We had the just miss list.
we had the
but-
just misses.
I had one that I thought of after I talked to you guys yesterday. I think you can make a case that UVM should be good.
Do it.
It's you have all these states past Massachusetts. So you got Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. That's really it. Those three.
McGill.
UVM's a good school. I forget what conference they're in.
America East, maybe.
But it's one that they could get the bid potentially.
Yeah.
And it's actually I know some people who went to UVM. It's one of those schools. I don't know if you have a selection bias with people who went to schools. I'm going to tell you what school they went to. I like UVM graduates. I've always enjoyed them. I have friends who are UVM. I've never met anyone from
there.
UVM where I'm like, that dude
Ryan
sucks.
Russillo's from UVM. Is it?
They all
I
bring
think that's
something to the
one,
table, and I think it would be fun if they had a
Yeah.
good team. So I just
That
wanted to
would
make
they
my case
do.
on that.
By the way, they do kind of have a good team.
Yeah, they do. They
like,
were in the mix. They made
yeah.
the tournament.
Yeah, they always kind of have a
Yeah.
good team. But
They're a good
they're just
13
not-
seed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are the ones we actually went with.
This
We're-
is exciting.
We're gonna start with again the dinosaurs, the programs that were great back in the day that are no longer great. This is the Bill Simmons special. You actually brought this up to me, and I thought you were crazy. And then I researched it more, and I'm on board now. Seattle.
Yeah.
I want to hear your thoughts first as to why you thought Seattle.
They have a couple great things.
Okay, go ahead.
First of all, Elgin Baylor, one of like the 12 greatest basketball players of all time, went to Seattle in the late 50s. So the little history. I like when the school had the one amazing guy. Like Holy Cross is like this too, where we had Heinsohn and Kuzi, and we won titles. And now it's like a million years ago, but it's still there's a little DNA. The campus is cool. I don't know if you guys have been to
I've been
Seattle,
there.
but it's like it's right in the middle of everything, and it's a nice campus, and it's one of the fastest growing cities we have, and there's a ton of money. And you look at like Phil Knight with Oregon football, and he's just throwing a shitload of money in there to make Oregon football good. It's like this could be Jeff Bezos trying to find reasons to make us like him as he slowly owns the entire universe. It's like, oh, this is one of my passions. I'm bringing back Seattle basketball. I just like it. Plus, it would be cool to have just Seattle, like Duke, Seattle, Final Four. Like it just feels like they should have a team. That's my case.
So the obvious problem is Washington is in Seattle, University of Washington.
But I said this to you, like, I'm fine taking Washington's corner. What corner
Yeah.
am I taking? They
Right.
They've lost Lorenzo Romar, so now they're struggling to see how they're going to
they've
get
had
players
a lot
up
of
there.
players that arrived there in suspicious circumstances, and then
Yeah.
the team's underachieved. Like that's not a corner.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Like the more I looked into it, it actually made sense that you could conceivably like let Washington be the football school in Seattle, and Seattle can be the basketball. Seattle can be like the Butler and just be in downtown Seattle.
I think there's room for both.
Yeah.
What sounds like a better feud, Seattle versus Oregon or Washington versus Oregon?
They both sound pretty good. I mean,
Yeah, Seattle versus Oregon. That sounds like a feud, right?
Yeah, Seattle's a great city too. I mean, with all the stuff going on there, I mean, it's a way to draw people in. And it's like, even if you're not going to be a star at the school, you could get a job in Seattle.
Yeah,
so you could
can
actually
intern.
sell that whole angle. It's like, well, it's not just about basketball. So you get some smart kids in there too, divvy it up. I don't know, it works out.
What conference are they in?
Well, they used to be in the West Coast
Yeah,
Conference.
I don't remember
the
what they're
WCC now. So they went back down to Division II. And then they had to go back to. Then in 2009 they get back to D1. They reapply to go back to the WCC. They deny them. This is a team that went to the 1958 title game, lost to Kentucky. Could have won the game without Adolph Rupp doing some shiesty things to get
Rupp
Elgin
thing.
Baylor fouled
Yeah.
out of the
Yeah.
game, and they didn't even let him back in the conference. So that's the thing also that they're dealing with. They're not in the WCC, which would have been great
the
for
thing
them.
I saw on
So where are they then?
lost.
They're like free agents.
Yeah, I
actually
there's
didn't know.
some
Look it
small
up, Tate.
conference.
I
yeah.
saw
That's a travesty.
So WCC blew it.
Wikipedia said that Seattle in the 1960s produced more NBA players than any other program in the country.
Wait,
I wasn't
what?
around to. Yeah, right.
That doesn't
It's
seem
shocking.
conceivable.
It doesn't seem right, but I don't know. I
What's-
trust
They're
Do we
in
know
the
what they're-
Western Athletic Conference.
the whack.
the WAC. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
Isn't that
not
with, like-
bad. The
that's not
whack's
bad
not
at all.
bad.
But the WAC's been blown up over the past few years with the Mountain West and all this.
I like the
Yeah.
whack.
Yeah.
Who's in the WAC now? Like Boise State? And
No, they went to
Boise
the Mountain
State's
West.
in the Mountain West.
Yeah.
These conferences are so dumb.
It's
Once BC left the Big East, it was all hell broke loose.
So this is what happened to Seattle, because I was curious about this, because they, like I said, they had in the 60s they were great. They had Elgin Baylor in the late 50s. What I saw said in the 70s Boeing struggled. All the jobs in Seattle were Boeing jobs.
Yeah.
Boeing started struggling. People were moving out of Seattle, and they didn't have enough money to like fund the athletic program.
Oh.
So they started cutting funding. They moved them down to NAIA. And then the Sonics come in 70. They win the title in 77.
79,
And then when
yeah.
people start coming, or 79, yeah.
Yeah.
And then when people start coming back, the money starts pouring in. They all want to go towards the Sonics, and it's just never really recovered.
Jeff Bezos. This is
So
your destiny.
we
Forget
take the
about making
Pelicans,
a
we
quadrillion
throw them back
dollars.
to the Sonics, and we also bring back Seattle basketball all in one swoop. And there you go. We save Seattle
You
basketball.
got Anthony Davis in Seattle.
Yeah.
You have a rejuvenated Seattle college basketball team. I'm in. I'm moving.
It's very
I'm
much an uphill
moving
climb.
houses.
It is very much an uphill climb at this point, like going up against Washington. But it can happen. That's the cool thing about basketball. You can like turn it around quickly.
We know
'Cause-
what it takes. It's the Jimmy Chitwood.
Yeah.
You need the guy who's from there who's like, I'm
Right.
from Seattle. I'm bringing
Yeah.
this program
They
back.
had-
Think about
the,
if Jamal Crawford had thought about this, 15 years ago. He was like, I just want to go to Seattle and just take over.
That's
kid-
our worst fear of this is that Jamal Crawford is the coach that brings back Seattle, and he's a disaster.
By the way, they're also competing with Gonzaga, which is kind of a
I
problem.
feel
as
like
well.
Gonzaga can get
Gonzaga's
taken down.
national now. They're everywhere.
Mark
Gonzaga's
Few's been there for.
international.
It's
Yeah.
not cool to go to Gonzaga anymore. They're a top 10 school.
Yeah.
You might as well go to Duke at that point.
It's the same thing.
All right, so
All right, that's one in the book. Seattle.
speaking of Gonzaga, the next one we're going to talk about is San Francisco. Bill Russell.
Yeah. Another
And
one, another legacy one.
The reason I want to talk about this is because I have a juicy conspiracy theory here. So Bill Russell and K.C. Jones in the 50s won back-to-back titles at San Francisco, 55 and 56.
People forget.
San Francisco goes to 7 Elite Eights in a 20-year span from 55 to 74. That's really, really good. 7 Elite Eights in 20 years is insane. That's very, very good. In 1977, they start 26-0 and are number one team in the country with Bill Cartwright. So they're still, like, even in the 77, they're
I
still
remember
a good
that team.
Then in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, they get put on probation because, as it turns out, they've been cheating their asses off. Like you wouldn't even believe. Academic fraud, paying players.
I remember a Quentin Daly thing that was bad.
Quentin Daly hits a woman.
He
averaging-
was way. I think he did way more
Yeah,
than
he
that.
probably did more than that.
He was like, if you had him in 2017, he would be in a
Yeah.
electric stretcher.
Wouldn't be able to talk about
Yeah.
it.
So Quentin Daly gets arrested. So the program's under probation, and the president basically says like a zero tolerance thing. Then Quentin Daly gets arrested for assaulting a woman.
Yeah.
During the trial or the court proceedings or whatever, it come to find out he had been getting paid for a no-show job by a booster.
Yeah. And that was it.
The president said, "This is out of control. I'm cutting basketball," and they do a self-imposed death penalty. And San Francisco, I think, has been to one NCAA tournament since.
And there was one other piece to that is Sports Illustrated carried just a crazy amount of weight back then because we didn't have the internet. You basically had your local newspaper
Mm-hmm.
and Sports Illustrated. And they did one of those big SI stories.
Yeah, like a
on
big feature piece.
How
Yeah.
corrupt the USF situation was, and that killed it.
So here's my juicy conspiracy theory. The president who did the self-imposed death penalty, as far as I know, this is the only time a school's ever self-imposed said we're.
Yeah, that's unheard of.
Usually you wait till the NCAA does it for you, right? The president of San Francisco who made that decision holds 2 degrees from Gonzaga. He went to undergrad at Gonzaga.
Oh,
he got his
sabotage.
master's degree at Gonzaga. So this
Conspiracy
president,
Bill is in the house.
have your attention.
I like this.
He steps down as president of San Francisco in 1991. Gonzaga's first NCAA tournament happens in 1995, and they've like just been a dynasty ever since.
Interesting.
So he fell on
do
the
I have your
sword.
attention?
Yeah.
It's a good one. You San Francisco, obviously, great place to, especially the Warriors are in town. They could get all the trickle down. The people who can't go to the Warriors games will go to their games. I like the USF is fun to say. SF, whatever. Mm-hmm. And the Bill Russell thing, he's still alive. If you're going to do it, he won't go there, by the way. He's disowned them. But you win him back. You win back Russell.
Why did you disown him?
He played there in the 50s. I'm sure stuff happened that he wasn't happy about.
Yeah.
But I think you have to do it while he's alive. So
they have
a couple years left.
They have a bunch of these AAU schools that are now up in Napa. And they're basically like these Croatian guys. They're all going to these AAU schools that are up in Napa Valley. Like Otan Jankovic is one of these guys. He's going to be like the number one Croatian. He's like number one Croatian player. He's like 16 years old. And I'm thinking to myself, what if these Croatians come up, play AAU basketball up in Silicon Valley area?
They get funneled to USF.
And then they funnel them down to SF. You get some international players in there. Then you get like one or two kids that love the Warriors, grow up shooting threes, put them in the program, flip this whole thing around.
So
and
Eddie Q. Oh, he won't do this because he's a Duke guy.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking because he's so big in the Warriors, this could be his next passion is to be rejuvenate USF. But
who knows? When K leaves, he
Duke.
might say he's done with Duke. He's tired of doing the cross-country flights.
When K leaves. They'd be dragging his bones out of there. USF, great one.
Yeah,
good choice.
That's a very good one. Yeah. By the way,
good unis too, right? The green.
Oh yeah.
I forgot another key piece of my conspiracy. Gonzaga joined the WCC that San Francisco is in the exact same year that all the probation stuff started happening. So,
he definitely fell on the sword for everyone.
Like the president, as soon as he realized this is my school's rivals, these people, yeah.
And the 1957 Final Four: Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Lenny Rosenbluth.
All right, so here's our next dinosaur. Holy Cross.
Holy hell.
The Holy Cross C words, as we call them these days.
I'm going to let that slide.
Let it slide.
What to you was the problem, and why was it? Why did Holy Cross turn down the Big East invitation in 1980? That's to me was the problem. Is that the problem?
We spent so much time talking about this when I was there in the late 80s because sports was such a big part of the school. It was one of the reasons I went there. The football team was like almost undefeated when I was there. Our basketball team, like Lionel Simmons, the L Train came in from LaSalle. Like we were trying to make the tournament every year. It still mattered, and we would always talk about the Big East and be like, Holy Cross versus BC could have been like one of the great rivalries and was for a while, and they just didn't want to do it. Like all the priests who ran the school, they just something about the Big East. When we did the 30 for 30 about it, all my notes were like, "Can we get more Holy Cross in this?" Like, but we mentioned it, but it wasn't. Ezra did that, by the way. The guy who did the OJ one, but
yeah,
it's a great fork in the road, and it costs the school a lot of money, I think. Because the thing with basketball, if you're gonna go, I think at that point though you had to go in for everything. I don't think you could have picked and choose which ones. So it came down to all the scholarships you needed for all the different sports. But if you do it correctly with basketball, you're talking 12 scholarships on the boys' side and the girls' side. It's 24 total. It's a good business decision.
Yeah.
You gotta have an awesome practice facility. So that's like $40 million. You got to pay a coach, whatever, a couple million. But other than that, if you play it right, it's smart business.
And it's also like it's hard to find a school that has won a national title. Like there's only a few schools that have won national championships. So when you have a school like Holy Cross to say, "Hey, we've won a national championship," you can sell that and to anybody and be like, "Okay, well they have reached the pinnacle before. We can flip this thing around again." Which I think is weird that you never hear that.
How many Big East schools at the time had won? Like in 1980, had won national titles as they were forming it.
Yeah,
that's why they asked us first.
Yeah.
Couple other advantages: Worcester, which is like 45 minutes from Boston, 2 hours to New York. Highway. It's a good central location. And then the conference. The I think it's still called the Patriot League.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's still the Patriot League.
It's an automatic bid every year. And you see what Gonzaga did in their conference, and then St. Mary's took their corner a little bit. But in the Patriot League, it's basically been Bucknell and a little bit of Lehigh. But it'd be just so easy to win 11 straight Patriot Leagues if you had the resources. Wouldn't take much. They've tried. They've just hired the wrong coaches and made the wrong moves over and over again.
And now, do you think they're just out of the business? Is there no hope for the future?
We made it 3 times last decade, and the one time that all we had to do was win in round 1 once, and it would have snowballed.
Yeah, they were in the playing game, right?
The Ralph Willard era.
Their 16 seed, 2016.
No, there was in 2003. we went toe to toe with Marquette and a
The
guy
D.
by the
Wade,
name of Dwayne Wade.
Yeah.
And he's just killing us. And my dad and I are like, who the fuck is this guy? Is this guy like having the game of his life? What's happening? And he like held us off, but we played well in that game. And I think if we had won that game, things would have happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks, D Wade.
Thanks, D Wade.
But yeah, if you're picking Patriot League, if you're just going by conference, who could own the conference, they're the logical pick in that conference because you wouldn't want to live in Lehigh or Bucknell.
Holy Cross has not been ranked in any poll since 1978, and they could have joined the Big East in 1980. And I don't know. I'm sure it made a lot of sense at the time, but that's a big time what if.
It didn't at the time. It doesn't now, and I'm still upset about it. I'm still mad about it.
Yeah. So our next one, this is the one I thought should be like if we were to rank these, this is my number one. Houston.
It's a great one. It's got all the
Houston
everything you
Cougars,
want.
Phi Slamma Jamma. I'm actually wearing my Phi Slamma Jamma shirt today.
One of the great college teams we've ever had. Worthy of a documentary, which they ended up getting.
Yeah, they went to. Did they go to three? They went to 3 straight Final Fours, right? 82, 83, 84.
Three straight Final Fours, 2 straight finals, and they lost to NC State and Georgetown, right?
In 82,
Yeah.
I think they lost to Carolina in the Final Four. 83 was the team that should have won it and lost to
The
NC
Sidney
State.
Lowe NC State team.
And then
Yep.
84 did not have Drexler was gone by then.
It's
but
bigger
they're
than
still
that
good.
though, because because I was there for that. They made college basketball cool.
Yeah.
College basketball, the 70s of college basketball were not cool, and you couldn't even dunk for like half the decade. And then it was like UCLA and centers, and then Larry Bird showed up, and he was like a Comet and Magic, but then they were gone.
Yeah, 79.
But there was never an above the rim team,
Yeah.
and it was a lot of guys like Jack Givens and guys who were like 6'5" guys who they were the first team that was like, oh my God, what is this? And combined with Louisville and some of the guys they had, that was it, man.
I love hearing Phi Slamma Jamma stories because it makes everyone who tells a story sounds like they're 400 years old. And they're just how no one had ever dunked before. It's like these guys were dunking.
It wasn't that nobody had dunked before, but it was more like the style was unheard of.
It
Like
was so much fun.
Samson and Ewing are playing the old school style. Where, like
it's
I
all
just drop it
centers
in.
and these guys were like, all we want to do is dunk on people and do alley oops and just fucking lose our minds.
You look up like old newspaper articles about these teams, and they're like Clyde Drexler slam dunks the basketball with such with such
that's
grace.
how boring
And you're
college
like,
was. College was it was just like that. It was very. You weren't supposed to.
It was almost reserved.
Show off.
Yeah. Everyone was hating on people for showboating. Yeah.
So them and Darryl Griffith was big too. He was. I think he graduated a year before that, but he was. Those were the first guys that, Dominique at Georgia, who you didn't really get to see because there wasn't a lot of college basketball on, but that was when basketball became fun.
This is one I can't really figure out. Houston. This is the reason it's my number one is because you have the 4th biggest city in the country. Texas is a big. Is it 4th biggest? Houston 5th biggest? Is Phoenix? I don't know. Whatever. Top 5 city in the country in population. Texas is a basketball state, even though football is king there. They still churn out a ton of basketball recruits every single year. It's a public school, so there's no. I mean, you can't play the whole like we're trying to be an actual
you can't
school.
do the. You can put in public records requests.
Anyone can get in.
The problem with that is you can't cheat as easily. You can't hide your
Still
finances. And I never really understood like why it fell apart. I mean, Guy Lewis was there for 30 years, and he's kind of the reason they were good in the first place, their coach. But
can I just
really
tell you how
made
much
sense.
fun you would have had with Guy Lewis if you had a column back then? One of the worst game coaches I've ever seen, college or pro. He left either Hakeem or Drexler. I'm old now. I can't remember. In the title game, they got 4 fouls in the first half. One of those two guys. 4 fouls in the first half.
Is this 83?
It was in the finals. It was I think 83. There's no way that's ever happened in the title game. He was so bad.
Yeah, that's a big. That's
Good for Valvano. Did he get his whole story off that?
Oh my God!
So thanks to Guy for that.
But they've taken some swings at it. They've just made bad hires. Because I remember when they hired Clyde Drexler.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. It's like local heroes coming home. It's like he was terrible. He was a terrible coach.
And then he just quit.
He quit to
like-
spend more time with family. Is what he said.
He quit to be a terrible. He quit to be an announcer.
Right. Yeah, but like I couldn't even find like a real reason why it all fell apart. Even which is because like we've talked about. Holy Cross had their, didn't join the Big East. That's why they fell apart.
I thought they had some like
theirs was conference
probation stuff.
Well, the best I could find was like conference realignment happened. Like in the 80s and 90s, TV contracts started. There's a Supreme Court case. This is probably boring everyone listening, but there's a Supreme Court case that basically said that that schools that the NCAA can't dictate TV marketing and stuff, and like the schools can market themselves to TV contracts. So you can basically sign your own TV contracts. So when that happened, conferences
and they
started,
were in the Southwestern Conference at the time. Yeah,
conferences started getting together. The SEC like made their own TV deal. They got a ton of money. Then Arkansas is like, I want some of that money. They jump out of the Southwestern Conference.
And then that
just
whole
kind of
conference
snowballs.
blew
So
up.
Houston's issue was they didn't jump into the SEC in time.
They just kind of didn't.
They were late to the
strike
party
when the iron was hot, and that was it. But like that doesn't really seem like a death blow, does it?
They had
you
the
can
history, great name.
Yeah.
Houston Cougars.
You still
Right?
have
That's what they are.
Yeah.
Uniforms are all right. They should be able to cherry pick every Texas kid,
absolutely
all of them, and they're in a nice big city that is. I would imagine would be fun.
And
to
you
go
got
to college.
Houston basketball is back now. Like the Rockets are good. It's fun to play basketball in Houston.
Yeah.
Like people talk about basketball in Houston.
It'll happen. I think this one happens at some point. It'll
And
just be the right
Sampson's
coach.
there.
They have
And
Kelvin Sampson there, yeah.
Sampson will do whatever it takes to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Like they're going to get one big recruit, and everyone's going to kind of raise their eyebrows. But then it's going to be like, well, Sampson's there.
Samson's the guy that sunk Indiana's program.
I was going to say
Sampson.
that
That's how
sounds
you know
more
that name.
likely that they get blackballed in 3 years from playing basketball.
But that's what you.
Sampson's the Larry Brown at Houston.
That's what you got to do. You got to cheat. Just not get caught.
That's what we would talk about this. Me and my Holy Cross friends. When there was a rumor at one point that Patino's son might be a Holy Cross coach. I forget how many years ago. I was like, bring him in.
Yeah, Little Richard.
Let's cheat for a couple years. Bring the
the way to
suitcases
do
of
it.
cash. Let's go.
Slick that hair back
Where
and
do
get
I
rolling.
send my money?
Oh yeah.
You can funnel it through my checking account.
All right. You want to move? Moving on to the next one.
So this is those are the four dinosaurs.
Those were the four dinosaurs that used to be great.
Seattle.
We feel like they can
San
revive it.
Francisco, Houston, Holy Cross. Those are the big four.
Those are good ones.
Those are good
Yeah.
4 ones.
All have real tradition, great players, guys
Yeah.
who could.
Yeah.
The other good thing we forgot to mention is the legends who can come back.
Yes. They're all
Where it's
still
like,
alive.
when you're Houston, it's
They're all
like
pioneers.
Guess
Yeah.
who's coming back? Hakeem Olajuwon.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
a big difference than like Tom Heinsohn and Bob Cousy. Thank God they're still
Can
alive.
you imagine the concession ideas? The dream shakes?
The
You just have-
shirts.
chocolate dream
The
shakes?
throwback jerseys? Yeah, you need
those
that.
four represent, by the way, like the worst case scenario horror story for like Indiana. That Indiana fans just think they're like right there to getting back to the top, but I'm sure Holy Cross fans were saying the same things in the
Well, Indiana's
in the
weird
80s
because
and the
all
It's
the
happening.
great players you had, but you don't have that signature Cousy Heinsohn guy.
Isaiah.
But he was there for 2 years and fought with Bobby Knight the whole time.
It is true. Indiana's problem is that
It's like Kent Benson.
Indiana. It's always about the team, and it was always about the.
Well,
they don't have names on the backs of the
You put the program
jerseys, and
before the people, and when
Yeah.
you did that, when you excommunicated Bobby Knight, that kept you from getting Sean
Right.
May. Scott May is now basically hanging out at North Carolina. You lose a big guy like that. You don't have Isaiah coming back on campus. He's in Atlanta
No,
doing
Isaiah
TV
disowned
work.
him.
Yeah, So,
really,
like,
the guy was Bobby Knight. He was the legend.
We got Victor Oladipo though. He's making it happen.
Don't laugh, man.
But
He's
they
like the
don't-
ninth
they don't,
best player in the league.
I know, but
They don't.
Depot.
But no, that's Indiana's thing. Is they don't prop up individual players. They don't retire jerseys. They don't put names on the backs.
let
It's
me
like,
tell you
it's all
this:
about
Will
the program
Sheehy
and-
is welcome to come back,
yeah,
and that's
there
the
you go.
problem.
I will say, watching Celtics Pacers the other night, the crowd and the Depot and that connection is like kind of Reggie Millerish now.
It's
all of a
amazing.
sudden. They like lose their fucking minds.
He's
for him.
100% the most popular Pacer
Oh my
since
God.
Miller, for sure. And
Has to be.
he might be the most popular ever by the time he's done playing. 'Cause-
IU kid who comes back and
Yeah,
becomes like
that's amazing.
an all-star immediately.
I'm actually into the Pacers now.
I'm kinda into
yeah,
it, too.
I know, it's awesome.
All they need is Cody Zeller.
All right, moving on. So those were the four dinosaurs. This next one, Princeton. I'll just throw it out there. I'm not really sure we can really what the ceiling is for them. Like I feel like with Houston could actually. I envision a scenario where Houston can actually be like a top 10 program every single year. Princeton, I'm not. They kind of have some obvious obstacles, but Tate, you really like this one.
Well, the obvious obstacle is that they can't do scholarships because they're in the Ivy League. But
Right.
for anyone that has a brain, you know that the Ivy League figures out other ways to give them quote-unquote scholarships. I mean, they've set them up in nice places to live. They figure it out. They beat the system.
They only figured it out recently though.
Yes.
Like they were holding on to like we care about the academic integrity.
But you
of
guys are
these
leaving
places.
out one advantage they have though, the Ivy League, which I didn't even know until Tommy Amaker took over Harvard. It's all need-based scholarships, which you could do whatever. But the advantage is you can just cut somebody or knock them off the team, or you don't have the guaranteed scholarship. So that's what he did to some of the older kids. So these juniors and seniors who We're like, oh yeah,
Very Duke thing.
basically a free ride to Harvard. And at any year they can go, yeah, so you're not on the need-based scholarship anymore. That's out. And you give that money to somebody else. It's shady.
Tommy Amaker's figuring it out, like how to
Slowly but surely. That's the thing.
But he's not the right guy for it.
No.
He's figured out how to game the Ivy League, but that's not the guy we need figuring out the Ivy League. We need
I have
someone
a
better.
Princeton contention for this one.
What's that?
I don't like Princeton. I don't want them to be good. I think they have the highest douche per student rate of any school that I know. Have not had good experiences with Princeton people, and I think it would be annoying if they had a good basketball team. So I hope this doesn't happen.
They are kind of good right now. They have this like weird like Kerry Kittles is their he's their assistant coach there. They have all
Kerry
these
Kittles.
Yeah, they have these NBA guys that have come back and like sort of been involved in the program. They've made the NCAA tournaments. They've given some scares. They made it to the Sweet 16.
They almost beat UCLA one time. They almost beat Georgetown one time, I think.
Yeah, they have some stories and
They
some
must
promise.
beat Georgetown on St. Patrick's Day, which was one of my most exciting college moments.
Yeah. So they have
That was Hoosiers.
They have like these moments in history that everyone remembers, and then they obviously have the Princeton offense, and basically everyone is. We were talking about this earlier. Everyone runs the Princeton offense now. It's basically like there is no
variations of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's no positions in basketball anyway. I mean, they don't run the basic like baseline cuts and all that stuff. That's like cookie cutter stuff, but it's basically the same thing. So they have this impact on basketball. So if you're smart, you can just sell that and say, hey, we don't have a five-man here. We have anyone can play. We'll play five guards as long as, we get rebounds and we hustle and we do all this sort of stuff and we can shoot threes. I don't know. There's something to sell there.
So Princeton is your Ivy League pick because we have to pick one from Ivy League.
I think if we're picking an Ivy, like right now, Harvard is actually like doing it in the Ivy League.
Because
if I could pick any program, it would be. I think Princeton's the best suited if you're like if you fired every coach in the Ivy League and then now you're saying like
reset.
What's the best? Like we're doing a reset. I think Princeton is the best one.
Can I make the case for Harvard?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's in an unbelievable location.
That is
Cambridge,
true.
right next to Boston. It is probably the single best location for a college. It's amazing. They have that Ivy League advantage that we talked about with the scholarships and all the chicanery. It's Harvard. It's like a top 3 school anyone wants to go to. Mm-hmm. But also, like with the advanced metric stuff, they have all the smart people. They can dip over to MIT. They can come up with, like Harvard could have figured out the shoot 1,000,000 threes a game thing like 10 years ago.
They probably did. They just didn't tell anyone.
They didn't have the right kids.
Princeton has Russell Crowe though. Wasn't that kid the beautiful mind?
Russell Crowe. So we don't think Columbia should be in this mix at all.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Is Columbia's just dead with sports? That's it?
Honestly,
no
yeah.
point of no return.
I completely forget that Columbia even exists.
Yeah,
because
same.
they're so irrelevant.
When I think
on
of the Ivy
sports.
League from the South, like the only 2 schools I thought of ever were Harvard and Princeton, because those are like the only ones we ever talked about.
Yeah.
So it's like,
and we think Brown
Cool.
is
it's
not
too
gonna
crowded.
happen.
Providence has already got Providence, and Rhode Island's even pretty good as well. You can't have 3 good teams in Rhode Island. You can't.
Can I say one thing about Princeton? You got David Blatt, who played on the team with David Duchovny.
Okay.
So you come back, David Blatt coaches Princeton. He gets Duchovny as like his cool Hank Moody type. He goes and recruits kids. It's like the new age of the living room. He comes in, puts on the sunglasses, like sweet talks your mom. There you go. Like that's the recruiting pitch of the century. Is like David Blatt, who's coached LeBron, and then you got David Duchovny, aka Hank Moody.
The Princeton sell is exactly what you said. Like they just need to say we like invented modern basketball as you see it today. Like I think that's how they do it. Yeah.
It's easy.
And
I
we're
was just trying to
douchebags.
wrap that- We're douchebags.
And then
What
David
about-
Duchovny walks in.
What are your thoughts on Bill Bradley?
Amazing.
Just in general, as like
50 years ago. One of the great sports books of all time.
If we're talking about legends at all those other schools,
Bill Bradley helps the Princeton case.
yeah.
I agree.
Do you think he has sway in him showing up and like I don't know?
He was
Because I only know him as like this modern iteration of him, which is like obviously a smart guy who's been, like I respect him, but it's like when I'm thinking of basketball legends, he doesn't really come to mind.
But
like a top 10 all-time college player.
Yeah.
I think he was just talking about the impact of his career.
He was second guy, I think, to get 2,000, 1,000 club, and like Oscar Robertson was the first guy, like in his career in college. So
definitely on the would have been amazingly fun to play with team. I don't know if he's the starting small forward because I think I would put the legend there, but he's coming off the bench at least.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I don't know. Great sports book too.
Well, let's wrap this one up. We'll
We
turn
got
this
7
into a
schools
two-parter.
left.
Yeah, we still have plenty.
And
plenty
the
to
best
talk about.
discussion is coming.
yes. That's a great tease.
All right, part 2.
We got a lot more teams to talk about. We don't want to get hung up on all this stuff. So we got the dinosaurs done. We have the Duke, North Carolina of the West Coast. We're going to discuss that, and I think it's not what people would expect. that we're going to talk about. But that's all coming up in the second part. Any final thoughts, Titus, before we
I'm
move
sticking
on?
by my Nebraska pick. In part 2, Simmons grills me even more on Nebraska. I'm standing by it. Cornhuskers, you should be better. I continue to make the case in part 2. Part 2 coming Friday, is it?
Friday.
Friday we'll release part 2. So hopefully if you enjoyed part 1. Part 2, we get into more power conference teams. We get into less of the Holy Crosses and San Franciscos and more of the teams that you're actually familiar with.
More appetizers that we had in this first one.
Right.
It's the full course coming in the second
Right,
part.
so check that out, and thank you so much for subscribing. Hit us up on Twitter at Club Trillion, at Tate Frazier, at One Shining Pod, and until next time, save the crew.